You got money? Or did you just wander in here like a stray dog looking for scraps?
Coffee and pecan pie. That's all.
Sure it is. Let me guess. You'll pay in loose change like the rest of them.
Here's a 20.
There. Pick it up, monkey.
Phones went up. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The man looked at the coins, looked at Gary, and stayed exactly where he was. Gary had no idea that those coins he just threw would cost him everything. His job, his reputation, and a whole lot more. 3 hours before those coins hit the floor, Maxwell Owens sat in a quiet corner office on the 14th floor of a downtown Atlanta high-rise. The desk in front of him was covered in paper, acquisition reports, lease agreements, inspection schedules. 31 restaurants, all now under the banner of Owens Hospitality Group. The deal had closed 72 hours ago. $60 million, the biggest purchase of his career. His assistant knocked twice. Mr. Owens, the press conference is set for Friday. Marketing wants to know if you'd like the announcement at the flagship or cancel my afternoon. She blinked. Sir? I'm going to Buckhead. He pulled a canvas jacket off the back of his chair, faded, wrinkled. It looked like something a mechanic would wear on his day off. The Magnolia Grill. I want to see it before anyone knows I own it. She'd worked for him long enough to know the routine. Maxwell Owens didn't walk into new properties in a tailored suit with cameras rolling. He walked in looking like nobody. Old boots, no watch, a ball cap pulled low. He wanted to see how the staff treated a man who looked like he had nothing, because that told him everything a spreadsheet couldn't. Should I call the regional director? Let them know you're... No. He grabbed his keys. That's the whole point. 20 minutes later, his sedan, not the Mercedes, the 10-year-old Honda, pulled into the parking lot of the Magnolia Grill. From the outside, the place looked fine. Stone facade, tall windows, boxwood hedges trimmed sharp. A brass sign by the door with the name in clean serif letters. It sat on a corner in Buckhead where the average dinner check ran north of $60, and the lunch crowd wore dry-cleaned shirts. Maxwell stepped out, canvas jacket, work boots still dusty from a job site he'd visited that morning, ball cap with no logo. He looked like a man who might ask for directions, not one who'd just signed for the building. He paused at the entrance. Through the glass, he could see half-empty tables, afternoon light cutting through the windows in gold slats. A young woman behind the counter wiping down the espresso machine. Jazz, low and easy, bleeding through the door seal. He pushed inside. The smell hit first. Seared butter, rosemary, something sweet in the oven, maybe the pecan pie listed on the chalkboard behind the register. The floors were dark hardwood, recently polished. The chairs were heavy. The napkins were cloth. Nice place. Quiet place. The kind of spot where people came to feel comfortable. The young woman at the counter looked up and smiled. Her name tag said Denise, early 20s. She had kind eyes and a nervous energy, the sort of person who checks twice whether she got your order right. Afternoon, welcome to the Magnolia. You eating in today? Just a coffee and a slice of that pecan pie if you got it. We sure do. She punched it into the register. That'll be $8.50. Maxwell pulled a 20 from his wallet and laid it flat on the counter. Denise reached for the bill, and a hand came down over hers. I'll handle this one. The voice came from behind the register. A man in his early 40s stepped out from the back hallway. White shirt, tie, name tag pinned at an angle. Gary Wilson, manager. He had the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile, more like a gate that could swing shut at any second. He looked at Maxwell the way you'd look at something stuck to your shoe. Denise pulled her hand back. He already ordered, Gary. Just a coffee and... I said I'll handle it. She went quiet. Her eyes dropped to the counter. And just like that, the warmth in the room shifted. The jazz kept playing, but the air felt different. Tighter. Like a window had just closed. Gary picked up the $20 bill, held it between two fingers, turned it over slowly like he was examining evidence. And Maxwell Owens, founder of a hospitality empire, the man whose signature sat on $60 million worth of contracts, stood on the other side of that counter, being looked at like he didn't belong. He said nothing. He just watched. Because that was the whole point of the jacket, the boots, the 10-year-old Honda. He was here to see the truth. And the truth was about to walk right up and introduce itself. Gary held the 20 up to the overhead light, tilted it left, tilted it right, rubbed his thumb across the face like he was checking for counterfeit ink. Maxwell watched him do it. Didn't say a word. "Where'd you get this?" "Excuse me?" "The bill." Gary flicked it with his finger. "Where'd you get it?" "From a bank. Same place everybody gets them." Gary didn't laugh. He turned to Denise without looking at her. "Get me the UV pen." Denise froze. "Gary, it's just a 20. Did I ask for your opinion?" He snapped his fingers. "Pen, now!" She opened a drawer and handed him a small black light pen. Gary uncapped it and dragged it across the bill in slow, deliberate strokes. The light passed clean. No smudge, no flag. The bill was real, and everyone within earshot already knew it. Gary stared at the result for a long beat. Then he tucked the pen back into his shirt pocket and dropped the 20 on the counter like it smelled bad. "Can't be too careful these days." He looked Maxwell up and down. The jacket, the boots, the ball cap. "We've had problems before. Your type comes in, orders something small, then causes trouble." "My type." "You heard me." The couple at table 4 glanced over. The woman nudged her husband. He shook his head slightly. "Don't get involved," and went back to his salad. Maxwell kept his voice level. "I ordered coffee and pie. I paid with a clean bill. Can I get my change and my food, please?" Gary leaned against the register, crossed his arms. "See, this is what I'm talking about. Attitude. You walk in here looking like—" He gestured at Maxwell's clothes. "Like that? And then you want to get loud with me?" "I haven't raised my voice once." "Not yet. But I know how this goes." The espresso machine hissed behind Denise. Steam curled into the air and disappeared. She stood motionless, hands flat on the counter, eyes locked on a spot between the two men like she was praying for the floor to open up. Maxwell took a slow breath. "I'd like my change, and I'd like my order." Gary smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile a man gives when he knows he's holding all the cards. Or thinks he is. He punched open the register, counted out the change with exaggerated slowness, then slid it across the counter. Maxwell looked down. The math was wrong. He'd handed over a 20 for an $8.50 order. He should have gotten $11.50 back. There was a 5 and 2 ones on the counter. $7. "This is short." "No, it isn't. The check was $8.50. I gave you 20. That's $11.50 back. You gave me 7. Gary shrugged. "Maybe you miscounted. Happens a lot with cash people." Cash people. "You know what I mean." Gary's eyes flicked to the line forming behind Maxwell. A woman in a cashmere coat, a man in a polo shirt, both white, both watching. "Look, you're holding up the line. Take it or leave it." Maxwell didn't move. "I want the correct change." Something shifted in Gary's face. The fake smile dropped. What replaced it was harder, colder. The look of a man whose patience had run out. Not because he'd been wronged, but because he'd been questioned. "You calling me a thief?" "I'm calling the math wrong." Gary stepped around the counter. He moved into Maxwell's space, close enough that Maxwell could smell the coffee on his breath and the cheap aftershave on his neck. He lowered his voice, but not enough. People could still hear. "Let me tell you how this works. You came into my restaurant. You're lucky I'm serving you at all. Plenty of places around here would have sent you right back out that door the second you walked in dressed like a bum." He poked a finger toward Maxwell's chest without touching it. "So take your $7, take your pie, sit down, and be grateful." The room had gone completely silent. The jazz track had ended, and the next one hadn't started yet. For 3 full seconds, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator case and the distant clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Denise broke first. Her voice came out small, barely above a whisper. "Gary, he's right. The change is short. I can fix it on the register." Gary spun on her. "One more word. One more, and I write you up before your shift ends. You understand me? Denise's mouth closed. Her eyes went wet. She took a half step back from the register and looked at Maxwell with an expression that said everything. I'm sorry, I can't. I need this job. Maxwell gave her the smallest nod, almost invisible. It's okay. Gary turned back to him. The power in the room was now entirely on one side, or so Gary believed. He had the name tag. He had the register. He had the security guard. He had a room full of people who wouldn't speak up. He snapped his fingers in the air. Marshall! From near the front entrance, a broad-shouldered man in a black polo shirt straightened up. Marshall Anderson, security. He'd been leaning against the host stand, watching the whole thing with the stiff posture of someone who didn't like what he was seeing, but didn't know how to stop it. Keep an eye on this gentleman for me. Gary put air quotes around gentleman. Make sure he doesn't cause any more disruptions. Marshall walked over slowly. He positioned himself a few feet behind Maxwell's left shoulder, not aggressive, but present. A shadow with a badge. Maxwell could feel him there. He could feel the room watching. He could feel the weight of every assumption Gary had made in the last 5 minutes, about the jacket, the boots, the skin, the cash. He reached for his coffee. Gary slid it across the counter hard enough that it sloshed. Brown liquid spilled over the rim and pooled on the saucer. There's your coffee. Gary smiled again, that gated smile. Enjoy your visit. Maxwell picked up the cup, took a sip, set it back down. Then he said very quietly, What's your full name? Gary blinked. What? Your full name, first and last. Why? Just want to remember who I'm talking to. Gary puffed up, straightened his tie, tapped his name tag with 2 fingers. Gary Wilson, floor manager, 6 years, and I'll be here long after you're gone. Maxwell looked at the name tag, looked at Gary's face, and something in his eyes shifted, so small that only Denise caught it. Not anger, not hurt, something closer to a decision being made. 6 years, Maxwell repeated softly. Got it. He picked up his coffee, turned, and walked to a table near the back wall, sat down with his back to the room, set his phone on the table face down, and waited. Maxwell sat at the back table for 12 minutes. He drank his coffee slow, ate his pie in small bites, watched the room from under the brim of his cap. Gary watched him too, not subtly. Gary stood behind the register with his arms crossed, eyes fixed on Maxwell like a hawk tracking a rabbit across an open field. Every few seconds he'd mutter something to Denise or glance at Marshall. The message was clear. I'm watching. Don't try anything. Maxwell set his fork down. The pie was good. Buttery crust, pecans roasted just right. Whatever was wrong with this restaurant, it wasn't the kitchen. He stood up, carried his plate and cup to the counter, set them down gently. Thank you, that was real good. Denise reached for the dishes. I'm glad you... Hold on. Gary stepped forward. He planted both hands on the counter. You're not leaving yet. Maxwell looked at him. I paid. I ate. I'm done. Yeah, well, I've been watching you. Gary tilted his head. Sitting back there on your phone, looking around, checking the exits. I was eating pie. Nah, I know what casing a place looks like. The word landed like a brick. Casing. Like Maxwell was a thief scouting his next hit. A woman at table 6 put her hand over her mouth. The man in the polo shirt shifted in his seat and stared at his plate. I wasn't casing anything. Then you won't mind emptying your pockets. Gary nodded toward Marshall. Just to make sure nothing walked off that doesn't belong to you. Marshall hesitated. He looked at Gary, looked at Maxwell. His jaw tightened. Gary, I don't think... I didn't ask you to think. I asked you to do your job. Marshall swallowed hard. He took a step closer to Maxwell. Sir, would you mind just... You want me to empty my pockets? Maxwell said it flat. Not a question. Standard procedure, Gary said, for situations like this. Situations like what? Gary didn't answer, he just stared. Maxwell held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached into his jacket pockets. Left side first, a folded piece of paper. He set it on the counter. Right side, a set of car keys. He set those down too. Back pocket, a leather wallet. soft from years of use. He placed it beside the rest. That's it. Gary stared at the items, picked up the wallet, opened it, thumbed through the bills inside. There were several 20s, a 50, and what looked like a business card tucked behind the ID sleeve. Gary didn't pull the card out, didn't look at the ID. He wasn't searching for anything specific. He was searching because he could. He tossed the wallet back on the counter. It slid and almost fell off the edge. Denise caught it. "What's this?" Gary picked up the folded paper. "Personal. Not in my restaurant, it isn't." Gary started to unfold it. Maxwell's hand came down on the paper. Firm, not violent, just enough. "I said it's personal." The two men locked eyes. The paper sat between them on the counter. The acquisition agreement, though Gary would never know that. Not yet. Gary let go, smiled, stepped back. "Fine, you know what? I've been polite long enough." He turned to the register, punched it open, pulled out the remaining change, the $4.50 he'd shorted Maxwell earlier. Nickels, dimes, a few quarters. He held them in his fist, looked Maxwell dead in the eye, and threw them on the floor. The coins exploded across the tile. Some spun, some bounced. One quarter rolled all the way to the baseboard and stopped against a chair leg. A nickel landed on a woman's shoe. She jerked her foot back like it had burned her. "There's the rest of your change." Gary's voice filled the whole room. "Now get down on your knees and pick it up. Monkey." The word hit the air like a slap. Denise covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes were wide and wet. Marshall took a step back. The couple by the window stood up, not to intervene, but to leave. They gathered their coats without looking at anyone and walked out the front door. An older man at table 2, silver hair, expensive watch, looked at Gary and then at Maxwell. He shook his head. But he didn't shake it at Gary. He shook it at Maxwell. Like he was the problem. Like a man standing still and being humiliated was somehow causing a scene. "You heard me," Gary pointed at the floor. "Pick it up." Maxwell looked down at the coins. He could see his own reflection in the polished tile, distorted, stretched, cut in half by a crack in the grout. He looked at the coins. He looked at Gary's shoes, polished loafers, pointed toe, tapping impatiently on the hardwood. He didn't kneel. He didn't raise his voice. He looked up at Gary and said, "Who's your regional director?" Gary laughed. Actually laughed. Head back, chest shaking. "Oh, that's rich. You're gonna call corporate? On me?" He spread his arms wide. "Go ahead, call whoever you want. I've been here 6 years, pal. You think anyone's gonna take your word over mine?" I didn't ask if they'd believe me. I asked for a name. Gary waved his hand. "Patricia Davis, regional director. Knock yourself out." Maxwell pulled out his phone, unlocked it, tapped 3 times, held it to his ear. The whole room was watching. The diners, Denise, Marshall, Gary, even the kitchen staff had drifted toward the window in the swinging door, peering through the glass. The call connected. Maxwell spoke 6 words. Quiet. Even. Like he was ordering coffee. "Patricia, it's Maxwell, Magnolia Grill. Now." He hung up. Gary snorted. "First name basis with the regional director? Sure, buddy." He turned to Marshall and jerked his thumb at Maxwell. "Get him out of here, I'm done playing." Marshall didn't move. "Marshall, I said get him out." "Gary," Marshall's voice was low. "Maybe we should just wait." "Wait for what?" Marshall didn't answer. He'd heard the tone of that phone call. 6 words, no explanation, no begging. That wasn't the voice of a man filing a complaint. That was the voice of a man giving an order. Gary didn't hear it. Or maybe he did, and his pride wouldn't let him care. He turned back to Maxwell. "You've got 30 seconds to walk out that door, or I'm calling the real police. Not your fake corporate fairy godmother, the real police." Maxwell put his phone back in his pocket, picked up his wallet, picked up his keys, left the folded paper on the counter. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down. "I'll wait," he said. Gary's face went red. His fists tightened at his sides. He opened his mouth to say something, and headlights swept across the front windows. A black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Fast. The engine cut. A door slammed. Heels clicked on pavement, quick and sharp, getting louder. The front door swung open. Patricia Davis came through the door like a woman whose house was on fire. She was mid-50s, sharp gray blazer, reading glasses pushed up on her head. Her heels hit the hardwood fast. Click, click, click. And she was already scanning the room before the door swung shut behind her. Gary straightened up, smoothed his tie, put on his best manager face. He knew Patricia. She visited the location once a quarter, gave him satisfactory reviews, signed off on his schedules. He figured this was about the complaint. Some angry customer had gotten through to corporate, and now he'd have to explain himself. Nothing he hadn't handled before. A little charm, a little spin. He'd done it with Phil Keaton a dozen times. He stepped forward. "Patricia, hey, listen, I can explain." She walked right past him, didn't look at him, didn't slow down, didn't even register his voice. Her eyes were locked on the man in the worn canvas jacket sitting at the back table with his hands folded. Gary stopped mid-sentence. His mouth hung open for a half-second before he caught it. She stopped in front of Maxwell, and the whole room watched her face change. The rushed, anxious expression melted into something else, something that looked a lot like fear. Not fear of danger, fear of failure. The kind of fear that hits when you realize your boss just saw exactly what you let happen on your watch. "Mr. Owens." She said it clear enough for every table to hear. "I am so sorry. I came as fast as I could." Mr. Owens. The name floated across the dining room like smoke. Gary blinked. His hand, still half raised from his attempted greeting, dropped to his side. The couple at table 3 looked at each other. The woman's lips parted. Denise's hand froze on the espresso machine, mid-wipe, cloth pressed against steel, completely still. Marshall took a full step backward, like the floor had shifted under him. The older man with the silver watch, the one who'd shaken his head at Maxwell, slowly set his fork down and stared. "Mr. Owens!" Gary's voice cracked on the second syllable. "Who the hell is—" Patricia turned to face him. Her expression could have cut steel. "Gary, this is Maxwell Owens, founder and CEO of Owens Hospitality Group." She paused to let it land. Let every syllable settle into every corner of the room. "He is the new owner of this restaurant, of every restaurant in this chain. The acquisition closed 3 days ago." The room didn't gasp. It was worse than that. It went completely, absolutely dead. The jazz had stopped between tracks. The kitchen had gone quiet. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to drop away. The only sound was a glass of water somewhere. Ice shifting, settling, cracking in the silence. Gary's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. He looked at Maxwell. Looked at the canvas jacket. The work boots. The ball cap on the table. He looked at the face of the man he'd called a stray dog. The man he'd told to kneel. The man whose money he'd thrown on the floor. No! That's not—" He shook his head. "You're kidding!" Maxwell reached for the folded paper on the counter. The one Gary had tried to open. The one Maxwell had stopped him from reading. He unfolded it slowly, deliberately, and laid it flat. The Owens Hospitality Group letterhead was crisp and black across the top. Below it, acquisition terms, asset transfer schedules, entity names, property addresses, 31 of them, and at the bottom, Maxwell Owens's signature in blue ink. "I closed on this location Tuesday," Maxwell said. His voice was the same as it had been all afternoon, quiet, level, not a single degree louder. 31 restaurants, $60 million. I came here today to see how my people were being treated." He looked at the coins still scattered across the floor. A quarter near the baseboard, a dime under the chair, a nickel against the wall. All still there. Nobody had touched them. "Now I know." Gary's face drained. Not slowly, all at once, like someone had pulled a plug. The red flush from minutes ago turned to white. Paper white. His lips moved, but nothing came out. His hands, the same hands that had thrown the coins, hung limp at his sides. His fingers twitched once, then went still. Patricia stepped closer to Gary. Her voice was low and precise. "Did you throw change at this man?" Gary's eyes darted around the room, looking for help, looking for an exit, looking for someone who might back him up. The older man with the silver watch was staring at his napkin. The remaining diners looked away. The woman at table 6 had her phone angled directly at his face. Marshall was studying the floor. I didn't know who he... Did you call him a monkey, Gary? Silence. Long. Heavy. The kind that presses on your chest. There are 11 people in this room. Patricia's voice didn't waver. At least 4 phones were recording. I'll ask you one more time. Did you call this man a monkey and tell him to pick change up off the floor? Gary swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed. It was a misunderstanding. I thought he was... You thought he was what? Maxwell's voice came from behind Patricia, still seated, still calm. A stray dog? That's what you called me when I walked in. A stray dog looking for scraps. Gary flinched like he'd been hit. Maxwell stood up, slowly. He wasn't a big man, but something about the way he rose, unhurried, certain, like gravity answered to him, made the room feel smaller. The chair didn't scrape. It barely whispered against the hardwood. He walked toward Gary, stopped 3 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to make Gary feel the distance between them, the real distance, the one that had nothing to do with inches. You didn't disrespect the owner of this restaurant, Gary. You need to understand that. Maxwell's eyes were steady, dark, unblinking. You disrespected a man you believed had no power. That's worse. That's who you actually are. Gary's chin trembled. His eyes were glassy. He opened his mouth to respond, and nothing came. Not a word, not a sound, just air. Maxwell turned to Denise. The young woman was standing behind the register with tears running down her face, both hands pressed flat on the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. You spoke up, he said. His voice softened for the first time all day. When nobody else in this room did. I want you to remember that. Denise nodded. She couldn't speak, but she held his gaze, and in that look was something that hadn't been in the room all afternoon. Not when Gary was mocking, not when the coins were flying, not when the whole dining room sat frozen. Hope. Maxwell turned back to Patricia. I've seen enough. Gary started talking fast, the way people do when the ground is disappearing under their feet and they're grabbing at anything. Any word, any excuse, any version of the story that doesn't end with them standing alone. Mr. Owens, Look, I didn't know. If I'd known who you were, I never would have... That's the problem. Maxwell cut him off. Not sharp, not loud, just final, like a door closing. If you'd known who I was, you would have smiled, handed me my change, called me sir, pulled out a chair, asked how my day was going. And the next black man who walked in here in a worn jacket, you'd have thrown coins at him instead. Gary's mouth opened. Nothing came out. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry it was me. The words hung in the air. Nobody in the room moved. A woman at table 3 set her phone down slowly, like even the act of holding it felt wrong now. Patricia already had her phone out. She was typing with one hand, scrolling through contacts with the other. Her face was locked in the expression of a woman who knew exactly how bad this was about to get, and was already 3 steps into damage control. Legal, HR, communications. The calls would start in minutes. But first, this. Gary! She didn't look up from her screen. You are suspended effective immediately, pending a full internal investigation. You'll surrender your keys, your access badge, and your manager credentials before you leave this building. Suspended? Gary's voice pitched higher. A crack ran through the word like thin ice. Patricia, come on, 6 years. 6 years I've run this floor. I've never had a single... Keys, badge, now. Gary looked at her, looked at Maxwell, looked around the room for someone, anyone, who might step in on his behalf. The older man with the silver watch was putting on his coat. The woman at table 6 was still recording. The kitchen staff watched through the swinging door window in silence. No one moved. Gary reached into his pocket. His hands were shaking. Not dramatically, not the kind of shaking you see in movies. The quiet kind. The kind where the fingers don't quite obey. He pulled out a ring of keys. Front door, back office, supply closet, liquor cage, walk-in cooler, and set them on the counter. They landed with a dull clank that echoed louder than it should have. Then the badge. He unclipped it from his belt, held it for a second, looked at his own name printed across the front. Gary Wilson, manager. He placed it next to the keys. Denise watched from behind the register. She didn't blink. She didn't look away. 6 years she'd worked under that badge. 6 years of swallowed words and lowered eyes. She watched it land on the counter, and her jaw tightened. Not with anger, with something closer to relief. "Marshal," Patricia turned to the security guard. "Please escort Mr. Wilson to the parking lot." Marshal stepped forward. The same Marshal who 20 minutes ago had been told to shadow Maxwell like a suspect. The same Marshal who'd been ordered to empty a paying customer's pockets. The same Marshal who'd stood 2 feet away and said nothing while coins rained on the floor. Now he was walking Gary Wilson to the door. Gary looked at Marshal, looked for solidarity, looked for the bond between 2 men who'd shared shifts, lunch breaks, slow Tuesday afternoons. Found none. Marshall's face was stone. His eyes were forward. Whatever alliance had existed between them was gone, burned up somewhere between Pick It Up and Monkey. "Let's go, Gary." Marshall's voice was quiet. He held one arm out toward the exit, the same exit Gary had threatened to drag Maxwell through. Gary took 2 steps, then stopped, turned back to Maxwell. "I've given 6 years to this place. 6 years. Every holiday, every double shift. You're gonna throw that away over a misunderstanding?" Maxwell bent down and picked up one of the coins from the floor, a nickel. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, turned it over once, then set it gently on the counter, right next to Gary's keys and badge. "You threw this at a man and told him to kneel." His voice was even, almost soft. "That's not a misunderstanding, that's a choice, and choices have weight." Gary stared at the nickel. 5 cents. Sitting between the keys to a building he'd never enter again, and a badge with a name that would mean something very different by tomorrow morning. He turned and walked to the door. Marshall followed 2 steps behind. The glass door swung open. Afternoon light flooded in, warm and golden, the kind of light that doesn't care what just happened inside. Gary stepped through, and the door closed behind him with a soft click. Nobody in the dining room spoke. For a long moment, the only sound was the ice machine humming in the back and the faint, distant rumble of traffic on Peachtree Street. Maxwell turned to Marshall, who had come back inside and was standing near the host stand with his hands clasped in front of him. The security guard's eyes were on the floor. His shoulders were drawn in, not the posture of a man at attention, but of a man carrying something heavy. "Marshall." "Sir?" "You watched the whole thing." Marshall nodded, slow, heavy, like the word weighed something he wasn't sure he could hold. "When he told you to search me, you hesitated. I saw that. Something in you knew it was wrong." Maxwell paused. "But you still stepped forward." Marshall's jaw tightened. A muscle jumped near his ear. "I know. An order you know is wrong doesn't stop being wrong because someone with a name tag gave it." Maxwell's voice wasn't cold. It wasn't punishing. It was the voice of a man who'd had this conversation before, with himself probably more than once. "I'm not firing you, but I need you to sit with that. I need you to remember what it felt like to walk toward a man you knew didn't deserve it." Marshall looked up. His eyes were red. Not crying, but close. The kind of red that comes from holding it in. "Yes, sir, I will." Maxwell held his gaze for a moment. Then he nodded. Not cold, not warm, just honest. The nod of a man who believed in second chances but didn't hand them out for free. He turned back to the dining room. The remaining customers were frozen in their seats, forks down, phones lowered, caught somewhere between shame and relief that the storm had passed. A few of them couldn't meet his eyes. They stared at their plates, their glasses, the patterns in the tablecloth. Anywhere but at the man who'd stood in their restaurant and been called a monkey while they watched. Maxwell walked to the spot where most of the coins still lay scattered. A quarter near the baseboard, 2 dimes under a chair, a nickel by the wall, a penny near the bar. He knelt, slowly the way a man does when his knees have 56 years on them, and picked them up, one by one. His fingers moved carefully across the tile, not rushing, not making a show, just a man gathering what had been thrown. Denise rushed out from behind the counter. "Mr. Owens, please, let me—" "I got it." He gathered the last coin, a penny, half hidden under the lip of the bar, and stood. He looked at the small pile in his palm, $11.50, the exact amount he'd been owed. Then he walked to the counter and dropped every coin into the tip jar. The pennies and nickels rattled against the glass. A few settled at the bottom. A quarter spun once and went still. "Those belong to the people who actually earned them," he said. The video hit the internet before Gary Wilson's car left the parking lot. A 23-year-old nursing student at Table 6 had recorded the entire thing, from the moment Gary held the 20 up to the light, to the coins scattering across the tile, to Patricia Davis walking past him like he was furniture. 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Unedited. No filter, no caption needed. She posted it to her social media that evening with 4 words. "This happened in Buckhead." By midnight, it had 200,000 views. By morning, it had 4 million. The comments came in waves. Anger first. Raw, hot, immediate. People tagged friends, tagged news stations, tagged civil rights organizations. Then the clips started. People cut the worst moments into short loops. Gary throwing the coins, the sound of metal on tile. Gary saying monkey. Gary demanding Maxwell get on his knees. Each clip spread faster than the last, each one angrier than the one before. Then someone, a journalist, a viewer, nobody knew who was first, coined the hashtag. Hashtag #PickItUpJustice. It trended for 6 straight days. By Thursday, it wasn't just a hashtag, it was a movement. People posted their own stories underneath it. Black men and women describing the moments they'd been profiled, humiliated, turned away. Restaurants, hotels, car dealerships, doctors' offices, the thread grew into the thousands. Each story different, each story the same. Megan Taylor broke the full story on Wednesday. She was an investigative reporter for the local affiliate. Mid-30s, sharp, the kind of journalist who made phone calls that made people nervous. She'd seen the video like everyone else. But unlike everyone else, she started digging. What she found was worse than one bad afternoon. She pulled county employment records. She interviewed former staff, servers, bussers, a sous chef who'd quit after 18 months. She filed public records requests with the state labor board. And piece by piece, a pattern emerged that went far beyond Gary Wilson and a handful of coins. 3 formal discrimination complaints had been filed against Gary in the past 4 years. 3. All from black customers. All documented with dates, witnesses, and incident reports. None of them had gone anywhere. The first complaint, a black couple refused a window table that was given to a white couple who arrived after them, had been marked resolved with no follow-up. No interview, no corrective action, just a checkbox and a closed file. The second, a black delivery driver publicly berated and accused of using the wrong entrance, was filed and then quietly deleted from the system. The driver told Megan he'd called twice to check on the status. Both times he was told someone would get back to him. Nobody did. The third, a black teenager told to leave because she didn't look like she could afford the menu, was buried under a stack of unrelated paperwork and never forwarded to regional. 3 people who asked for help. 3 times the system looked the other way. The district manager responsible for reviewing those complaints was a man named Phil Keaton. He'd overseen the territory for 8 years. He and Gary played golf on weekends. They went to the same church. Their kids were in the same little league. And when complaints about Gary crossed his desk, Phil made them disappear. Megan Taylor put it all on television. Receipts, timestamps, the deleted files recovered from the company's own servers. She interviewed 2 of the 3 complainants on camera, their faces tired, their voices steady, their anger quiet and old. "I filed that complaint 14 months ago," one of them said. "Nobody called me. Nobody followed up. I figured they just didn't care." The second woman was quieter. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and looked straight into the lens. "I wasn't surprised," she said. "That's the worst part. I wasn't even surprised." Owens Hospitality Group released a statement within hours of the broadcast. It was short and had Maxwell's voice all over it. What happened at the Magnolia Grill was not an isolated incident. It was the result of a system that allowed abuse to be hidden, complaints to be erased, and accountability to be avoided. That system ends today. Gary Wilson was terminated for cause the same day. Not quietly, not with a severance package and a polite goodbye. His termination letter cited gross misconduct, discriminatory behavior, and violation of company anti-harassment policy. It was hand-delivered to his home address. He didn't open the door. The letter was left on his porch. Phil Keaton, the district manager who'd buried the complaints, was removed from his position and placed under review. 2 weeks later, he was terminated as well. His name appeared in Megan Taylor's follow-up report alongside internal emails showing he had personally deleted complaint records from the tracking system. One email, sent to Gary the night after the second complaint was filed, read, "Handled. Don't worry about it." 3 words. A man's dignity erased in 3 words. The EEOC opened a formal investigation. The 3 original complainants were contacted, re-interviewed, and offered a settlement through the company's legal team. The terms were private, but Megan Taylor reported that all 3 accepted, and that the total figure reflected not just damages, but years of being ignored. The Magnolia Grill closed for 2 weeks. When it reopened, there was a new district manager, a new floor team, and a new policy framework built from scratch. Maxwell announced the changes in a company-wide memo that Patricia Davis read aloud at every location. Anonymous reporting with third-party oversight. Mandatory bias and de-escalation training. Not a 1-hour slideshow, but a 12-week program with external facilitators. A customer experience audit conducted quarterly by an independent review board. And one more thing. Every Owens Hospitality Group location was required to post a visible notice near the entrance. Small plaque, brass, simple text. Every guest in this restaurant deserves dignity. If you experience or witness anything less, call this number. Below it, a direct line. Not to the manager, not to the district supervisor, to the external board. The public response was enormous. Hashtag Pick It Up Justice became more than a hashtag. It became a case study. Business schools discussed it. HR consultants cited it. City council members in Atlanta referenced it during a hearing on workplace discrimination enforcement. A nonprofit launched a dignity audit initiative inspired by the Owens model, offering free policy reviews to small businesses across the Southeast. And Gary Wilson? His name was attached to the clip forever. Every search, every result. The 3-minute video lived on the internet like a scar. He was quoted in think pieces he never agreed to. He was referenced in sensitivity trainings he'd never attend. A former coworker told Megan Taylor that Gary had deleted all his social media within 48 hours of the video going viral. It didn't matter. The internet had already saved everything. He didn't go to prison. This wasn't that kind of story. But the world he had built, the 6 years of power, the name tag, the register he controlled, the staff he bullied into silence, all of it was gone. Not because he disrespected the wrong person, because the right person finally had the power to make it stop. 6 weeks later, Maxwell Owens pulled his 10-year-old Honda into the parking lot of the Magnolia Grill. Same spot, same time of day. Late afternoon, the sun cutting low through the trees and painting the stone facade in warm gold. The boxwood hedges had been freshly trimmed. The brass sign by the door gleamed like someone had polished it that morning. He stepped out. Canvas jacket, work boots, ball cap, no logo. Same as before. He pushed through the front door. The bell above it chimed. That was new. A small thing. A welcoming thing. The smell hit first. Butter. Rosemary. Something sweet in the oven. Some things hadn't changed, but other things had. The host stand had a new face behind it. A young man with an easy smile who looked up and said, "Welcome to the Magnolia. Table for one?" "Just the counter if that's all right." "Absolutely, right this way." No second look at the jacket, no glance at the boots, no pause, no tightening, no quiet judgment behind the eyes. Just a man being shown to a seat. Maxwell sat down. The counter was the same dark wood, freshly wiped. The chalkboard behind the register still listed the pecan pie. And behind the espresso machine, pulling a shot with steady hands, was Denise Brooks. But her name tag was different now. Denise Brooks, assistant manager. She looked up, saw him, and for a second her face did something complicated. Surprise, recognition, warmth, and the ghost of a memory she probably replayed every night before sleep. "Mr. Owens," she smiled, a real one. "Coffee and pecan pie?" "You remember." "I remember everything about that day." She poured his coffee, set it down gently, no sloshing, no sliding. She placed the cup on a saucer with a small napkin folded beside it, the way you do for someone you respect, not because of their title, but because they're sitting in front of you. Maxwell took a sip. Same coffee, somehow tasted better. "How's the team doing?" Denise leaned against the counter. "Good, really good. The new training program. People were nervous at first, thought it was just corporate checking a box. But the outside facilitators, they're real. They listen. A couple of the kitchen guys said it's the first time anyone from management asked them how they felt at work." Maxwell nodded. "And the hotline?" 3 calls in the first month." She paused. "All resolved within a week. No burying, no deleting." "Good." He drank his coffee, ate his pie. Same buttery crust, same roasted pecans. The jazz was playing again. Low, easy, filling the gaps between conversations like warm water. The dining room was fuller than last time. A couple with a stroller by the window. A group of college students sharing a dessert. An older man reading a newspaper with his glasses pushed down on his nose. The room had an energy that wasn't there 6 weeks ago. The kind of energy a place gets when people feel safe in it. Maxwell finished his last bite, set his fork down, left a 20 on the counter. "Keep the change." Denise looked at the bill, looked at him, and laughed. The kind of laugh that comes out before you can stop it. The kind that carries 6 weeks of tension and relief and everything in between. Maxwell smiled, tipped his cap, and walked out the front door into the late afternoon light. Near the entrance, bolted to the brick wall at eye level, was the brass plaque. "Every guest in this restaurant deserves dignity. If you experience or witness anything less, call this number." He stopped, read it, ran his thumb across the raised letters. Then he got in his Honda and drove away. The tip jar still sat on the counter inside, the same one he'd dropped the coins into 6 weeks ago. Denise never replaced it. She never said why, but every new hire noticed it. And sooner or later, someone always asked the story behind it. She told them, every time. So let me ask you, and I want you to be real with me in the comments. If you were sitting in that dining room with your phone out, watching a man get told to pick coins off the floor, would you have stood up? Or would you have stayed quiet? Tell me, because I think the answer says more about us than any story ever could. If this hit you somewhere, share it. Not for me, for the next person who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.